Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I wanted to share another Cyrex panel that I did with a patient recently who was dealing with some digestive irregularity, discomfort, bloating, gas, stomach pain, high stress levels, and had a history of gluten and dairy intolerance in the past that required them to do an elimination diet and a candida protocol. So I wanted to share this one with you all because I really like this panel in particular. The Cyrex Food Immune Reactivity Screen tests over 140 different foods for both IgG and IgA antibodies. IgG antibodies are for systemic response, like in the bloodstream, if you're dealing with an infection, and IgA are in the mucosal linings of the body, like the gut, the sinuses, the mouth, the genitals, anywhere where you'll produce mucus or where the body is trying to prevent something from coming in and invading. Something else that's really cool about this panel is that they tend to check foods when they are cooked and when they are raw. A lot of a lot of lab companies will check for these antigens, but only in the raw form and not in the cooked form of many of these foods. And how often are you, say, eating a bunch of raw rice, So is it really that helpful to know that the body is creating inflammation to a raw food or it's not? Or is it a much more usable to understand how your body responds to a cooked food? Because when you cook a food, you are changing the structure of the protein in the food. So when you cook rice, for example, you break down some of the structural proteins, one that makes it more digestible, but then because the protein is shaped differently, your immune system treats it like it's a different food. Even though they're both rice, the immune system may react differently to it. So for this individual, this is a male patient in his 30s, has children and runs a small business similar to me. So I related to this guy. And you can see that there's a variety of different things going on here. So this person, as I said before, had a history of gluten and dairy intolerance. They weren't celiac and they didn't have like a severe allergic reaction to it. But if they would have any dairy or gluten, they said they would feel really crummy for the next few days. In particular, after eating dairy, I remember this guy said that he would get phlegmy like right away, and that was his tell, like, oops, I had some dairy. Or if he would eat something with gluten in it by mistake, like some soy sauce, which is a common way that people accidentally ingest gluten, he would get burning in his ears, which I thought was really unique. But that was his classic tell, like the canary in the coal mine. Oops, I ate some gluten, and then he said he'd be paying for it for the next few days. So you can see as far as dairy goes, um, there's a couple different levels here. Things that are in range are considered normal, so no major response. Equivocal means it's between 1 and 2 standard deviations beyond the mean. So if you see equivocal responses that are getting really close to, say, the reference range here, say, so soft and hard cheese, you get more suspicious, that maybe this really is a true response. Given that this person has a variety of different things going on and a bunch of foods that are out of range, I would focus more on the foods that are out of range. That means they're more than 2 standard deviations above the mean of what you'd expect the immune system to respond to exposure to this patient's blood. So I forgot to explain, this is a serum-based test. So you get a blood draw, and then they will centrifuge the blood and take the serum out and expose that serum to all of these different proteins and then measure the antibody response to see if that is causing inflammation in you. So you can see for this person, they are not eating any wheat because they're on a gluten-free, dairy-free diet, but they have been eating rice. So you can see that rice is causing some inflammation. Thankfully for them, not all the time, and especially when the rice is cooked, then it's not as severe as, say, a rice cake or eating wild rice, which is a different plant, but some people can mistake them, so it's good to check both of them. For this person, beans and legumes largely seemed okay. Wasn't too worried about that, but hey, then we get down here, nuts and seeds, and look at this. Just incredibly big response to nuts and seeds, in particular, cashews and hazelnuts. Yeah, cashews in particular. Oh, and Brazil nuts too. So when I asked this guy about this, he said that recently he'd been having more digestive upset, but anytime he would eat cashews, the dry roasted kind that have salt on them, he'd get this sort of tightness in his chest, like he was about to have an asthma attack. He said that he used to have really bad asthma as a child, but that this improved. But lately, when he'd be eating cashews, he'd get a response like he might be getting an asthma attack. Thankfully, he didn't. He doesn't need an inhaler yet because we're going to be working on these things. And because he was eating a gluten and dairy-free diet, he said he'd been relying a lot more on nuts and seeds to get more calories and to replace things like cheese, yogurt, or dairy yogurt with coconut yogurt, or having things like almond butter in his smoothies and protein shakes. So unfortunately for this person, they're going to have to go through a period of nut and seed-free diets. We get to vegetables, again, raw and modified, because in many cases, you're not just eating raw beets, you're eating cooked beets. So you can see even in the case of food being cooked, it can create some inflammation. So for this person, they're going to have to avoid these foods in red. Chances are, if they do an elimination diet and improve their digestion, improve their leaky gut, intestinal permeability, because when I see a patient or a client with this many foods in the red, what does that tell me? They have leaky gut, intestinal permeability, leading to a lot more inflammation and probably leading to some of this more inflammatory response to other foods they may not normally um, create inflammation from. See, we go through the vegetables. Thankfully, plenty of different choices for them. One of the reasons it's so important to eat a diverse diet, as many different um, types of foods as your digestive system can tolerate. One, it improves your microbiome, so there's more diversity in the microbes that can break down and digest that food. But two, it helps to train your immune system to tolerate more things. If you eat the same things all the time, like this individual who's eating a lot of nuts and seeds on a regular basis, then if you have leaky gut, if you have inflammation in the digestion or digestive dysfunction, it can lead to an imbalanced immune response, and you can get these food sensitivities like this. So one of the best ways to avoid that is to eat a wide variety of different plant-based foods, especially those that are unprocessed and anti-inflammatory. Speaking of processed inflammatory things. Where did I see it? Ah, yes. Safflower and sunflower oil, oleosin is another word for oil, creates inflammation for this person. So even though, say, potatoes, cooked, baked, or fried, don't seem to cause inflammation for him, if he's eating potato chips that were fried in sunflower, safflower oil, they are going to create an inflammatory response. And if he continues to eat this way, eventually these potatoes might also become red because the immune system is already inflamed and it might start to treat the potato proteins um, as an irritant as well. Something else to point out here, you'll see some of these foods have aquaporin on them. So they're testing spinach, the protein, but then also the spinach aquaporin. Aquaporins are these little membrane channels that are found in certain foods like spinach and tomato that allow water to come in and out of the cells. There are several foods like spinach and tomato that have aquaporins that are very similar to human aquaporins. So when the body's creating inflammation to say tomatoes and aquaporins, then the human body in this individual can start to treat the aquaporins in their own tissues, which are found in the gut and in white blood cells in the brain, like invaders. They can mistake the aquaporins in the human body for the aquaporins in the tomatoes that the person is ingesting. So this can lead to inflammation in the brain and inflammation in the gut, leading to worse intestinal permeability and inflammation. Let's see, we get down into fruits, and thankfully most of those are okay. Again, this person was eating a lot of nuts, so you can see coconut, meat, and water, which they consider a fruit down here, which is often also considered a type of tree nut, is producing inflammation. When I asked about this, the gentleman said that he was having coconut milk in the morning with his smoothies since he couldn't do dairy milk and had been doing that for quite a while. So given that his gut was inflamed and leaky, eventually, even though at first this wasn't causing a problem, now his body has an inflammatory reaction to it. As well as avocado, he said he'd been using more avocado oil because he'd been trying to avoid some of the unhealthier oils. Let's see what else we have here. Thankfully for this person, almost no fish or seafood or animal meats caused any inflammation. So for this person, he's going to be focusing on getting plenty of calories from uh, animal-based proteins, or if he is a vegetarian, then from beans and legumes, because you can see they don't create nearly as much inflammation. So he has to stay away from the nuts and seeds, and since he can't get calories from those, which can be an easy source of calories in some vegan vegetarians, he's going to have to start getting more calories from beans and legumes, or if he eats them, animal proteins. Thankfully, herbs and spices were also fine, so at least he'll have plenty of variety of flavor if he's getting tired of eating a lot of animal proteins. So this might actually be a case where a short period of a lion or carnivore style diet that's pretty much just animal proteins and certain healthy fats may be beneficial. Because if you can have a washout period where you're not eating all of those inflammatory foods and you can work on healing leaky gut and rebalancing your microbiome, then when you go back to introduce those foods after a period of elimination, then they won't cause as many issues for people. For people that do really well on a carnivore diet, this is typically why, because they have a lot of other foods causing irritation and inflammation, and then because the body doesn't respond to these animal proteins, they're able to tolerate them really well, heal the lining of the gut, and then sort of gradually introduce those other foods again. For this person, this is also something really important to pay attention to. They were really reactive to gums. Now, gums are found in all sorts of different processed foods, and even some foods that we would consider quite natural or relatively unprocessed. For example, the cans of coconut milk that this guy was having every morning with his smoothie. When I looked at the brand, some types of coconut milk, it's literally just coconut inside the can, but in a lot of them, they may have some guar gum as a stabilizer. And you can see for this individual, it's creating inflammation. So he will have to stay away from nuts, seeds, and avoid processed foods that contain gums. Beta glucan, this is a gum that's found in a lot of mushroom products. Carrageenan, this is from seaweed. It's used as an ingredient in a lot of different types of really processed and inexpensive ice creams. Um, Mastic gum, this one can lead to problems in some people because for one, it's very useful for trying to treat H. pylori infection if you're dealing with a lot of really bad heartburn and stomach acid. But if your body is reactive to it, then it's not going to be a good choice for you. Thankfully for him, mastic gum and xanthan gum seem like they're okay, but a lot of the other ones he needs to stay away from. And also, thankfully for him, coffee, tea, and honey were all fine. So I wrote down a little general dietary advice that this client said I could also share with you. So because he was previously gluten and dairy intolerant, we want to stay away from those for now. Generally speaking, until you can heal your digestive dysfunction, you don't want to test some of those old food intolerances until you really know. So say after he did a period of elimination and healed his leaky gut, rebalanced his microbiome, and then he could tolerate more of the nuts and seeds again, then he could try testing gluten and dairy, but for now I would avoid them. As I said, you'll have to go a nut and seed-free diet for now. You can actually get a seed oil card that's wallet size that you can keep in your wallet or your purse and take with you to restaurants so you can let the cook know. It's like, yeah, I really can't tolerate any of these seed oils. Is there any way you can cook my food in a more natural oil that my body can, digest and tolerate without creating inflammation. Things like ghee, avocado, coconut, olive oil, tallow, or lard, depending on the individual, are often really common ones. And then I was just informed by a client who has some South Asian ancestry that in India they use a lot of mustard seed oil, which was one that I wasn't familiar with. But as long as the mustard seed oil is cold pressed and they don't have an inflammatory response to other oils, that one is probably fine. You also want to focus on taking some anti-inflammatory oils like omega-3s from fish or algae oil, or the anti-inflammatory omega-6 GLA from borage, evening primrose, or black currant seed oil. He's going to really have to focus on improving intestinal permeability and probably dysbiosis based on the fact that he had so many foods that were causing severe inflammation, in particular the nuts and seeds, most especially the cashews, Brazil nuts, and hazelnuts. Let's see, eating a diet rich in legumes and animal proteins for calories and for plenty of protein, especially things like glycine or glutamine that help with intestinal permeability, and vegetables and fruits that are not on the red list. Lots of herbs and spices for antioxidants flavor and for helping to resolve intestinal permeability, things like turmeric from curcumin from turmeric, resveratrol from red grapes, and the epicatechins from green tea. And for this person, he'll have to watch out for gums and stabilizers. So generally speaking, he'll have to avoid processed foods, at least for the foreseeable future. Right, I hope this was helpful. This is my favorite food sensitivity panel by Cyrex. This is their Array 10. It's one of the best in the market, in my opinion.